To the Middle East now, Israel's military says it has now killed a prominent Al-Jazeera correspondent, namely Anas al-Sharif, and 4 of his colleagues were also killed in an airstrike in Gaza City. Al-Jazeera says the attack is punishment for al-Sharif's extensive reporting from northern Gaza, and Israel says he was a member of Hamas, a claim which Al-Jazeera has vehemently denied. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he expects to complete a new Gaza offensive very quickly. Israel has since come under sharp criticism at the United Nations Security Council in New York over the widening of its offensive in Gaza City. UN officials have also warned that the move will open another horrific chapter in the conflict. Palestinian envoy Riyad Mansour has also called for tougher sanctions against Israel. For this discussion, let's now welcome Mr. Thembisa Fakude, who's the Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues. Mr. Thembisa, sir, a very good afternoon. Great to have you with us. I'm at a loss for words. More journalists now killed in an Israeli strike, but reports point to this being a targeted hit due to, of course, the ongoing investigations as well as stories that the journalists and his team were working on simply unacceptable.
It is unacceptable, and one, of course, expects that the global media will raise this issue and amplify the noises that are supposed to put pressure on Israel, one, to open and give access to other journalists from other parts of the world to go and report on Gaza. But importantly, for Israel to stop its atrocities that are continuing in not only in Gaza, by the way, it's also in the West Bank. And this is and inside Israel proper, where the Bedouins are forcibly removed from their places and still suffer from the violence of the ultra-right-wing men and women who continue to harass them and kill them. So it's unacceptable, but I don't know whether the world will do anything. We were waiting, of course, for the United Nations General Assembly, when most of the countries have promised that they will have recognized Palestine by then. Even that, of course, will not change the situation. But you have a madman in Israel, a guy who continues to kick the can down the road for his own salvation, because he knows that when the dust settles, he's likely to go to jail. He's facing legal domestic challenges, and also, of course, he's been taken to the Hague, the ICC. So this is a guy who's taking his entire nation with him. But unfortunately, of course, the Israelis are in support of this war. They want the hostages to be released, but they are not condemning Israel's involvement in Gaza and the continuing genocide that we see every day.
But to directly accuse a journalist and go to the extent of even killing them on suspicion that they are a member of Hamas, and we haven't seen any tangible proof in this regard, Thembisa. And I'm glad that you mentioned the issue of global media not amplifying, of course, the fact that Israel, in fact, does not allow international journalists to enter the Gaza Strip and report independently. This should also be condemned. So why do you think this is never given much needed highlighting, even during some of these discussions, like in your UNSC?
Well, it's multifold, but largely it's racism. And we also beginning to realize that some of our colleagues we trusted with journalism and understanding the principle of journalism, they themselves are racist. If you, for example, have been observing this lack of access of journalists into Gaza, you hardly hear anything from the normal places where noises are normally made when either Zimbabwe or Russia refuses entry to journalists. They're the first one to shout foul and scream for the lack of access. But this time around, we hardly hear any of these big institutions actually complaining about lack of access and the continuation of killing of journalists in Gaza. We are now at about 250 journalists that have been killed inside Gaza, but there hasn't been any visible solidarity from, again, the normal quarters or media institutions that will often make noise when one of them is either arrested or denied entry to any of these important places. So we are having a problem within our fraternity of racism. That's the first point, I think, which is very important for us to note. But importantly, Benjamin Netanyahu will do as he pleases because he knows that he's got support from these institutions and they're not going to be hard on him. The only institution that has been projecting the reality of what's happening in Gaza, the West Bank, and inside 48 regarding or in respect of the Bedouins that are continuing to be harassed and killed by the ultra-Orthodox and right-wing terrorists inside Israel is Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera has been doing a good job keeping some of those journalists inside Gaza, most of whom are journalists from Gaza, born and bred in Gaza, and they've been covering this story and keeping the world informed about what's going on. And now what we see happening is that because Benjamin Netanyahu plans to go back to Gaza with his incursion and continue with his genocide, he's now killing the messengers. He's killing the journalists who are telling these stories. So this is a man who is hell-bent at this genocide, and he's got support, of course, from his own people, but importantly, he gets support from Donald Trump.
You know, this at the back of yesterday's UNSC sitting last night, Thembisa, is Prime Minister Netanyahu himself had went right ahead detailing his 5-point plan of the takeover of Gaza City that he has since defended. I mean, amid growing global pressure to abandon it, I mean, there's even issues here of proposed sanctions. So you said it last week and you've just said it again. Israel or Netanyahu in this case will not listen. So how else then should he or Israel be held to account if they will simply ignore any rule of law?
Well, the only thing that can be done is to continue with the boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel, to try and sideline and prevent them from participating in any of the global events, including, we know that universities, for example, now are stopping and preventing some of the Israeli academics because they're complicit. This is not only Benjamin Netanyahu who's hell-bent in continuing with this genocide. Israelis themselves are supporting his brutality and genocide in Gaza. So nothing will stop him. The only thing that will stop him or stop the Israelis from continuing to do what they do is if there's pressure put on them, and that pressure would come or must come in a form of boycott, in a form of sanctions, in a form of total isolation of this group of people who just feel that they are too special and they can kill as they please and plunder as they please whenever they feel like. And this is, in real time. We never thought we'll see such atrocities happening again. We read about them. 1945 was the last serious event of such a nature, where Hitler was, leading a group of Nazis and killing and plundering most part of Europe. Now we have someone who's actually worse than Hitler, who claims that his forefathers were the victims of Hitler. But we see him actually doubling on what Hitler did to the Jewish people, whether in Poland, in Germany, and other neighboring countries in Europe. Benjamin Netanyahu has done worse. We are talking of over 60,000 people that have been killed, and we don't know how many are still lying under the rubble, that those buildings that have since collapsed. So this is a very, very serious situation in our lifetime, and it's going to impact all of us. Eventually, those that at least lived through this moment. And this is why the only thing that we can do, being so far away from where this genocide is happening, is to continue putting pressure in terms of talking about this. But importantly, those who are involved in activism must call for boycott, sanctions and divestment from Israel.
You know, Thembisa, I know you mentioned racism there as well as support for the Netanyahu regime, but why else do you think global powers are so reluctant in, going ahead and sanctioning Israel to communicate a very strong and clear message that they will not tolerate the way that is conducting itself, specifically when they go against international law, and instead of statements of condemnation?
Well, there are two things. One is this religious proximity, particularly to the right wing and the right leaning Christians in the United States, who has strong influences around the world, who really believe that there's some prophets of some sort and Israel deserves to do what it's doing. So there's that religious and a prophetic situation that drives this atrocity. And this is why you'll find people in the United States defending this evil, notwithstanding that it's pure evil on a daily basis to see people killed while queuing for food. But there are people who are not even Jews who believe that Israel's got the right to do what it's doing. That's the first point. The second point, of course, is that America is supporting Israel, whatever it takes, and Donald Trump, with his aggressive transactional politicking, he's threatening all those that will condemn Israel or put pressure on Israel or boycott Israel with further sanctions. So you have one of the most powerful country in the world defending this evil, and as a result encouraging this man who's involved in committing this genocide to continue with these atrocities. So as long as you have those two things happening, particularly in the United States, you're likely to have Benjamin Netanyahu continuing with this genocide.
This is a very difficult conversation to have every time, Thembisa. Otherwise, thank you so much for your valuable input as always. Mr. Thembisa Fakude is a Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues, weighing in on, of course, the latest developments in the Gaza Strip, where a journalist belonging to Al-Jazeera alongside his team were ambushed in an Israeli strike. And, of course, Israeli military there says they believe he belongs to Hamas.